With the Skywalker saga finally being complete, I think it's about time I make a video ranking all of the Star Wars movies. My rankings are going to be based off of how good of a film I think they are, how integral the movies are to the Star Wars universe, what new and interesting concepts and characters that they added, and how enjoyable they are to watch as movies. I've watched the original 6 movies countless times, and the new Disney movies at least twice each, but the only one I've seen recently is Episode 9. So maybe if I rewatch them all again, my list would slightly change, but I don't think it would by much. All the way at the bottom of the Sarlacc pit, coming in at number 12, is the animated Clone Wars movie.
What? No. There must be some mistake.
Many people forget about this one when ranking the Star Wars films, but this was a Star Wars movie that was released in theaters, so I'm gonna include it. My most memorable moment from the movie was when someone tapped me on the shoulder and I turned around to find my Taekwondo instructor sitting behind me. If that's my most memorable moment, that's probably not a good sign, and I'm pretty sure he fell asleep during the film too. I know a lot of people love the Clone Wars series, myself included, but this film definitely was not the best the Clone Wars had to offer, and it does lose some points for not being live action, as weird as that sounds coming from an anime fan. At number 11 is Solo, a Star Wars story.
Is that so?
I actually enjoyed this movie, but there are a few reasons I put it this low on the list. The reason the character of Han Solo is loved so much is mainly due to him being played by Harrison Ford. Having a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford just felt weird, and the fact this movie wasn't really necessary led to a lot of people not watching it. Which leads me to my next reason. This is the first Star Wars movie to fail at the box office. Star Wars movies were set to come out every year in the foreseeable future, but Solo's failure caused them to put all of that on hiatus. I did like how the movie integrated Maul into the story, connecting the Clone Wars show to the live-action movies. And if Maul and Kira's stories expanded on in another movie or spin-off show, that would definitely give Solo some bonus points. Just barely managing to get into the top 10 is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
You are asking me to be rational. That is something I know I cannot do.
This movie has some of the cringiest dialogue in Star Wars, and a love story that is actually worse than Twilight. If it weren't for those atrocities, this film would have been ranked at least 1 or 2 places higher. This film does have a lot of good things in it that build the world of Star Wars. We are introduced to the villains, Jango Fett and Count Dooku, as well as the Clone Army. There was plenty of action scenes in this one, with all of the Jedi fighting in the arena, Jango Fett versus Obi-Wan, and the fight with Count Dooku. Yoda fighting for the first time was really a sight to behold. Spinning in at number 9 is Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I almost put this one below Episode 2, but there is one thing that keeps this movie the superior prequel. Darth Maul. Easily one of the most badass Star Wars characters ever created. He also went on to become one of the best Star Wars characters in general, due to his inclusion in the Clone Wars and Rebels series. And we may even get him in more movies or shows to come if Solo is any indication. This movie also had one of the best, if not the best lightsaber duel in the entire series, with one of the best soundtracks of the series to go with it. As the first of the prequels, it introduced us to the Star Wars universe during this point in time, showing us the Jedi Order and a bunch of new planets. We see Anakin for the first time before becoming Vader, we see Obi-Wan as a young man, and we see the badass Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn. This movie does have plenty of negatives. For example, the creation of one of the most hated Star Wars characters, Jar Jar Binks, who has basically become the face of the prequel hate. And it's arguably the most boring of the Star Wars movies. But when it comes to bad Star Wars movies,
There's always a bigger fish.
crashing into number 8 at light speed happens to be Episode 8, The Last Jedi.
And because of that, you must die.
This film split the fan base with a lot of its decisions. The way that Luke Skywalker's character was treated in this film was highly questionable. The reveal of Rey's parents was anticlimactic, though this gets retconned. Weaponizing lightspeed makes us question why this wasn't used before. The Casino Planet side plot seems kind of pointless. And the story barely progresses with the whole movie basically being one chase scene. All of the other Star Wars films have the story moving from one planet to another with multiple different events happening throughout them. But this story felt small, as the entire movie was basically one continuous battle and chase that was only broken up with Rey's training with Luke in the Casino Planet mission. While I didn't like some of the choices made with Luke, I did enjoy Mark Hamill's performance. And the throne room scenes with Kylo, Rey, Snoke, and his guards were extremely well done and some of my favorite of the series. Kylo killing Snoke in the way that he did and then taking the role of Supreme Leader himself instead of turning to the light side was a great twist. And Luke projecting himself across the galaxy was pretty cool, though I am disappointed we never got to see Luke fight in person. Swinging in at number 7 is Episode 7, The Force Awakens.
Anything else?
A lot of people consider this as the best of the sequel trilogy, and as a standalone movie, it probably is. But when looking at the series as a whole, I disagree. This movie is basically a copy and paste of Episode 4, with the main character starting on a desert planet, not knowing their real parents, leaving the desert planet on the Millennium Falcon, finding an old mentor from the previous trilogy, that mentor being killed by a masked man with a red lightsaber, and a large round death machine that destroys planets. Speaking of that large round death machine, this movie had the audacity to basically create a third Death Star. Episode 6 was already made fun of for having a second Death Star, and they basically did it again except with a planet. Being bigger doesn't make it scarier. If they can blow up planets, it just makes it a bigger target. People also talk about Episode 9 undoing Vader's sacrifice by bringing back the Emperor, but I think Episode 7 having Starkiller Base completely destroy the New Republic was a far bigger crime. The New Republic was what the Rebellion was fighting for, and it was taken out like yesterday's trash without us even getting to know anything about it. The victory everyone worked so hard to achieve in the original trilogy felt completely stripped away, with the New Republic destroyed, the First Order in power, Luke somewhere in hiding, Leia being a leader of another group of resistance fighters, and Han leaving Leia to be a space outlaw again, only to get killed later in the movie by his own son, who turned to the dark side off screen. This is still a fun movie though, introducing a bunch of new characters and locations, and it was cool to see older versions of the original trilogy characters. Storming through hallways at number 6 is Rogue One.
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations.
This is the type of spin-off movie I was looking for. It fits perfectly within the Star Wars universe, explaining why the Death Star was so easy to destroy in Episode 4, and it gave us a look at the consequences of war. Literally all of the main characters were killed in the final battle, and I'm really glad that's what happened, as that's what makes the most sense, and it shows that the good guys don't always win in war. And I call them the good guys, but in the beginning of the movie, the male lead Cassian Andor murders some guy just to make sure he doesn't leak any info. You could call this a necessary sacrifice of war, but it shows things aren't completely black and white. And of course, I have to mention the Darth Vader scene where he slaughters helpless rebels as they desperately try to get the Death Star plans out of there. This is easily one of, if not the most, badass scene in all of Star Wars. This movie still would have been good without this scene, but this was like the icing on the cake. And I love how it led right into the beginning of Episode 4, with Leia getting the plans and taking off in the Tantive 4. Electrocuting itself to number 5 is the newest installment, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. This film has been getting a lot of mixed reviews, and there are a lot of people who absolutely hate it, and they definitely have some valid criticisms. This movie is a little too fast-paced due to trying to cram too much into one movie, and as a result, a lot of things aren't explained properly. Out of all the Star Wars movies, this one probably has the most plot holes as well. That being said, there are a lot of great action scenes, and due to the fast-paced nature, it's one of the most exciting Star Wars movies. While the return of Emperor Palpatine is a strange choice, and his reveal felt a bit out of left field, he was as cool as ever in this movie, and it felt right for him to be the final boss of the Skywalker saga, as he was really the guy behind all 9 movies. I also like the reveal of how Rey was actually his granddaughter, and it makes sense considering George Lucas said Star Wars was all about family problems, not spaceships. Burning up at number 4 is Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
What?
How can you do this? This is outrageous. It's unfair.
Easily the best of the prequels, and arguably the most entertaining of any of the Star Wars movies. This is the movie where we see the end of the Jedi Order and the Republic, and the creation of Darth Vader and the Empire. Similar to Rogue One, this is a movie that shows the good guys don't always win. Except this time we're much more emotionally invested with the characters, and we literally watch one of them get cut up and burned. The lightsaber battles are many people's favorite parts of these movies, and this film by far has the most in the series. It arguably has the best one as well, with Anakin and Obi-Wan's much anticipated duel. We were also introduced to General Grievous, who is a cyborg with 4 arms, each one wielding a lightsaber. This movie sets up everything for the original trilogy perfectly, and you could honestly just skip episodes 1 and 2 and just watch this and then the original trilogy, which is something you can't say about the other two. Falling in at number 3 is Episode 6, Return of the Jedi.
So be it.
The climax of the original trilogy. This is where we first truly got to see the Emperor, got the final duel between father and son, and Vader's redemption. The beginning part with Jabba's palace was pretty cool, with the highlights being the Rancor and the Sarlacc pit. Endor and the Ewoks were okay, but I do think it was silly how the Ewoks helped take down
an entire legion of my best troops.
It was also pretty silly how they made a second Death Star, and how it was destroyed almost just as easily. We still got one of the best space battles the saga has to offer, and we got to see Luke come into his own and become a true Jedi Knight. Despite some minor nitpicks, this movie was a very satisfying conclusion to the original saga, and it deserves its place in the top 3. That's no moon, that's A New Hope. At number 2, I decided to put the original Star Wars movie, renamed Episode 4, A New Hope.
I've just about had enough of you.
This is the movie that started it all. Without this film, we wouldn't have gotten any of the others, which gives it a lot of bonus points. It also works very well as a standalone movie, as it has a clear beginning, middle, and end. Even if another movie was never made, the ending would have still been pretty satisfying, as the Death Star was destroyed and the heroes had a nice award ceremony where they got medals. Except Chewbacca. This movie does have some negatives, such as its not so good lightsaber fight, and it is arguably a bit boring compared to the other movies. But overall, it's just a good movie and a timeless classic that still holds up well today despite its age. There's only one spot left, and it should be of no surprise to everyone what I put as my number 1. Beating its way up to number 1 is the Holiday Special. Just look at its masterful dialogue. It also wasn't afraid to make masturbation references.
We also have to beat. So it's beat, 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 stir, whip, beat, beat, stir. That's not right. I'm sorry, please. Starting to have a fine aroma.
This film's bold choices easily make it the best Star Wars film of all time. Obviously, the real number 1 is Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. It is widely accepted as the best Star Wars film, and for good reason. The opening with Hoth was great, with the Wampa scene, sleeping in a tauntaun, the AT-AT, the brother-sister bonding. This film also introduced one of the best Star Wars characters of all time, Master Yoda. This movie is him at his funniest, and basically every scene with him is gold. Lando was also introduced, and him flipping back and forth between helping the Empire and our heroes made him a very interesting character. Boba Fett was another cool addition. I would have to say the lightsaber fight between Luke and Vader was the best of the original trilogy, and easily one of the best fights in all of the movies. It also has the biggest reveal of all the movies, and arguably of cinema history, with Vader telling Luke that he was his father. Luke actually loses this fight and a hand, while Han gets taken away on carbonite, making this another one of those films where the good guys don't actually outright win. Well, that's my list. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate if you gave the video a like. If you thought my list was bogus, use your anger to strike the like button anyways. and don't forget to subscribe. May the subscribers be with me, always.